People wander around with all the greatest stuff in the world, cosmetics and cleaning products. But when it affects your heart, when it really gets to you, then you start to explore what's been missing. In the United States alone, between 7 and 14% of the U.S. population has an autoimmune disease. It's happening because we are really surrounded in everything we do with a lot of chemicals that are not regulated, not tested.
You drink filtered water, buy organic, work out, try to stay healthy. But what if none of it's enough? You face 80,000 unregulated chemicals before breakfast. And it's not just in your food. It's in your mattress, your makeup, your kids at school.
I scoured position statements from the World Health Organization, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the Endocrine Society. Let me tell you, I was shocked and enraged. Where are the regulations, the consumer protections? Where's the labeling and the appropriate testing?
This is Dr. Cohen, not just a doctor, a triple board certified physician who left the system to uncover the silent threats no one's talking about. She's advised Congress, co-authored with Oxford, and now she's here to warn you. You're not paranoid. They're poisoning you. Knowledge is power, but in a toxic world, it's your only antidote.
A single liter of a plastic bottle contains upwards of 240,000 microplastics. And another study showed that up to 90% are nanoplastics.
Everyone knows microplastics and synthetic fragrances screw up your hormones. We have this huge drop in testosterone. What else are microplastics and fragrances doing to us that we don't talk about enough? They made forever chemicals. You make forever choices. Only one survives.
You're listening to The Human Upgrade with Dave Asprey.
Aly, I have a confession to make. I know a lot about medicine and biology. What the hell is rheumatism?
Rheumatism. Oh, gosh, great question. So rheumatologists, we're all still trying to figure out what exactly rheumatism and rheumatologists do. But it's basically the joints. I mean, rheuma, the flowing of, humors through the body, hitting the joints. And that's originally how rheumatology and rheumatism came about, Greek word. So that's primarily the illnesses that affect the joints. It is since that time, back in the early medicine days, it has expanded to infection, to crystal diseases. So there's just a lot of other things besides just arthritis.
I think you need a rebranding because 95% of people who are medical professionals don't actually know what a rheumatologist does.
They do when they're sick.
That's a fair point. And I actually do know because I've had arthritis in my knee since I was 14. I remember walking out of the doctor's office going, I have the diseases of an old person and I'm a teenager and what do I do with this? And I say since, I don't have it anymore because I fixed them. But it's such a problem and it feels like there's an autoimmune condition, certainly for me, that was going on. Are toxins causing people to get joint problems earlier in life?
Yes. What we're now seeing, and I say we, but I say we in terms of the studies, the epidemiology around the world, but I say we in terms of my 22 years of practicing actual clinical medicine, there is just such an uptick, an epidemic really rise in the number of autoimmune diseases around the world. I mean, in the United States alone, between 7 and 14% of the U.S. population has an autoimmune disease. And
is it that low?
330 million, you do the math, it's about 50 million.
Hashimoto's seems like it would be more than that.
Yeah, no, listen, this is something, it's not because we're better doctors in diagnosing, it's because this is happening. And it's happening because we are really surrounded in everything we do with a lot of chemicals that are not regulated, not tested. And the ones that are found to be problematic, especially for the immune system.
Just recently, Bobby Kennedy was online and he said, look, I have my suspicions and my thoughts, but I don't know what's causing all this, and we're going to get to the bottom of that. Don't we already know?
Listen, I'm pissed because I was in medical school for years and training for years. And by the time 15 years ago, I guess that's about right, by the time my dog became ill, and that's how I got into environmental health, he became ill, and I realized that he was younger and shouldn't have had an autoimmune disease as a dog, that breed. that's 15 years ago, and my eyes just completely opened up from that experience. And I think that's what it takes, some individually. But what was so jarring to me was that I looked around and said, how did I not know this in med school? How was I not trained to understand how environment plays a role in human health, whatever it may be? And I think it goes to this idea that, you don't know until it hits your heart. It doesn't, until it affects you, right? People wander around with all the greatest stuff in the world, cosmetics and cleaning products. But when it affects your heart, when it really gets to you, then you start to explore what's been missing in my training, what's been missing in my understanding. And the answer is that we are now, unfortunately, learning more about environmental health because we're all really either getting sick or having people around us that we love that are sick. And I point to endocrine disruption and immune disruption, but I focus really, even with the new book, on immune disruption, which I think people have paid less attention to.
It feels like everyone who's heard the show knows microplastics and synthetic fragrances. They screw up your hormones, right? We have this huge drop in testosterone. What else are microplastics and fragrances doing to us that we don't talk about enough?
So I've looked at the chemicals that are even in microplastics, and there's a variety of them, phthalates and bisphenols and brominated flame retardants attached to plastics. They're used for a variety of reasons, and they have lots of things, kind of infused into plastics, which become microplastics that get into our bodies. And of course, what you mentioned, all the chemicals that we now know are in our everyday products. And because of their ability to affect the immune system, I've coined the phrase immune disrupting chemicals, because I've already written 2 books on endocrine disruption.
Right.
We have, thousands and thousands of international studies supporting the work on endocrine disruption and how hormones can affect a variety of physiology and risk for cancers and immune disorders. But what people haven't seen also is the framing of the immune system around these issues. And we know that, for instance, every immune system cell in the human body has hormone receptors, including estrogen and testosterone. We know that the brain and the endocrine and the immune system, the neuroendocrine systems, all crosstalk and they communicate. And we know that when there's disruption in the endocrine system, there's often disruption in the immune system because of that connectivity. And so now you can actually start to see science that's supporting the fact that many of these chemicals directly affect the immune system in a variety of ways. It's not just through signaling, but it's also on the gut microbiome. It also affects directly from, say, benzene and lead and heavy metals directly to cytotoxicity and killing off cells directly. So there's lots of, molecular mimicry. There's lots of mechanisms that have been identified, but I think people most want to hear how they themselves will be affected in a positive way by making changes.
Okay, so all the chemicals, all the plastics, all the stuff, especially in the U.S., we've got endocrine stuff, so we're lacking testosterone, our immune systems are going crazy, all of which is pretty much described a lot of my life. Are we all just fucked?
Well, I say that to my 2 teenage boys when they run onto the artificial lacrosse field, but I say it in my head so that I don't ruin their games. But, here's the thing. We created this pickle, and it's really our job, not just as a society, which I would hope, and regulatory, which I won't wait for. Okay, that's the point of all my work is let's not wait for Godot. Let's actually do it ourselves. I believe I've seen in the literature, I've seen in the science, I've shared it in my new book about this topic, that when we change behaviors, we change the destiny of our health. Okay, we change the destiny of our health. And in the case of what I'm trying to share with people, it's the immune system and our immune health, which is tied to cancers as well and a variety of other issues. So the idea is that we have to take this upon ourselves. Literally the changes in some of our food quality, in filtering our drinking water, in choosing better products that we put on and around our bodies actually change the levels of these chemicals in our body, in our breast milk, in our urine, in our blood. And that changes the risk dynamic for developing a variety of chemicals, diseases and illnesses that come from these exposures. Is there a cause and effect directly? No. In humans, we can't see that entirely because we have so many confounders. But we see this in animal studies. We see this in occupational and epidemiologic studies. So we have enough to say we got to do this ourselves. We have to do it for our bodies and our families and future generations, really.
I know a few people who seem like they're genetically gifted. They can just swim in toxins. They can drink all they want. And I don't know, I'm thin. I'm happy. My joints don't hurt. I sleep all night. I'm like, what is up with these people? Are they just genetically better off than the rest of us?
That is really funny. The first thing that came to mind when you said that is I live in a farming town in central New Jersey. We boast the number one Superfund sites in the country in my state. So that's exciting. I think California's number 2 and Pennsylvania's number 3. But we live in the midst of 200 farm acres, and they are spraying or have been spraying in this farming town for decades, glyphosate, and they're potato farmers, a variety of things. And it's very interesting when I was lobbying my farmer that has land up to our house to swap out his chemicals, to discuss the issue. I'd bring over organic beer and have a beer with these farmers, and they're in their like 70s and 80s, right? And they would say to me, well, look, I'm 80, I'm 90, I'm 70. And I said, yeah, but you've had 4 wives that have passed away from breast cancer, from thyroid disease, cancer. It's remarkable how what we really now know is that it's kind of a dance. Who gets ill is a dance between 3 things. It's our environmental exposures, it's our lifestyle, and it's our genetics. And what we can control is our lifestyle and our environmental chemicals.
You're totally right. It feels like there's one more variable.
Uh-oh.
How healthy was your mom and your grandmother? So it's a multi-generational epigenetic thing. It's sort of like the old indigenous, I have no idea what the right term is these days. I grew up in New Mexico. So whatever tribe you're from, you would say, what does it do for 7 generations, right? Anything that you're doing to the environment or to yourself. And 7's a lot. That's probably the right number, but it's at least 3, right? So you could have adequate genes and your mom grew up super healthy and your dad too. And then that means that you will have 1 lifetime of resilience. But if you trash yourself, your kids are trashed. And then their kids are trashed. And it takes a while to dig out of it. And the whole arc of my work is like, all right, I want to make sure that I reverse all that stuff in my kids, right? So I did everything possible before and during pregnancy and childhood to give them sort of to climb them out of the clear health thing that I have. So are we creating this class of, say, healthier people? Because when people take action from what they learn on the show and reading your book and all the things, all of a sudden they're starting to go up, even though the vast majority of people are going down. Do you ever think about the multi-lifetime effects of this work?
I do. And I think if you have kids, I think you're particularly attuned to this issue. I'm not saying that everyone who doesn't have kids doesn't think about this. But, I'm kind of rooted in anthropology and evolution in my training. And first of all, I will mention that it's really not just mom and grandmom. It's dad and grandfather and all of both the male contributions and female. What we think of, though, as what you're alluding to also is sort of this vulnerable period of evolution, of development even, where, many of these harmful toxins and chemicals that I describe have perhaps have their greatest effect, which is the genetic effects, epigenetic effects, really. And it just argues for the fact that not only do we have to be healthier pre-pregnancy in order to get our bodies maybe ready, if we're able to do that, because of course not everyone can predict when they're going to be pregnant, but then that whole pregnancy period absolutely is something we're discovering. The placenta actually does not prevent chemicals from crossing over into a growing fetus. Which includes the body and also the brain of a fetus. And because we don't have those protections that we now see in testing, I mean, you can test the placenta even for microplastics. The idea is that we want to get on board with education. And that's really why I teach high school and try to teach other doctors about this topic, which they should be getting in med school, but don't. I think we need to just really educate the next generations of how do we keep our bodies not just thriving, I should say living, but thriving as well. And it goes to not only the chemicals, but also the nutritional levels, which I know you talk a lot about. It's a twofold approach to human health. It's taking away the bad guys and it's adding in the good stuff. And I call that human fertilizer. So, yes, we have a real generational concern here. But I will tell you, as a rheumatologist, having practiced 22 years now, that I see more cases of de novo new onset, new incidents of autoimmune diseases with no family history in their family, and also at younger ages than would be expected if you would expect it at all. And I think that really pushed me towards the urgency of this work and trying to get this out there and teaching other people about it, because we don't really have the time to drag our feet, to be honest with you.
Why do you think that known toxic chemicals are legal in personal care products and on our crops?
Well, it all started back in the 1950s, post-World War II. We had a real love of new compounds, new industrial chemicals, solvents. Look, we wanted aircraft to fly lighter, so we made plexiglass. We wanted, naugahyde and rayon and, any number of materials and plastics included that would make our life convenient. And perhaps even to reduce the use of resources that we were utilizing at the time in terms of, steel and wood and those kind of things. But what happened was we, really gave the fox the rule of the hen house and never really thought ahead, not just to what these chemicals could do to humans, but what they could do to the environment, which cycles back into the human body. And I talk about that with my conversation on water a lot. But the idea is that, we really let the genie out of the bottle. And we now have it's estimated around 95,000 chemicals is sort of a going number. And we have about 1,500 new compounds at least every year that get, patented. And, it's really kind of too big of a scale to understand in terms of what we've allowed in without testing or regulation, especially testing for toxicity, safety, and even in vulnerable populations like, pregnant women, children, that type of thing. But I do think, again, this goes back to waiting for regulation to work at a snail's pace or encouraging it, certainly, by our dollars and what we purchase, who we vote for. All these things matter. They really do matter. But when I talk about the urgency from a human health perspective as a physician, I think we need to do this, more on our own and now and, and be empowered to do it. It's possible. It's doable.
One of the things that's so shocking is the way the big chemical industry, they hunted nagas almost to extinction in the 1950s for all the naga hide. I'm not familiar with. Naga hide, it's fake.
Oh.
That. Get it? It was a dad joke. I got you.
Yes, you got me. I'm like, what? Okay. That's right. I need a drink before this.
It's funny, though, because they're kind of marketing it that way. And when you came into my house, which is where the studio is here in Austin, all the carpets are wool because it biodegrades. The blankets you see on the couch, they're sheepskin. Well, I was a sheep farmer. They biodegrade. I actually have an antique fox blanket that I found, and that will not accumulate in fish that I eat 100 years from now when I'm alive. So I'm doing my best in my home to have less toxic stuff, but the lights were under. I have all sorts of synthetic crap that make microplastics in the air, right? I don't have fleece, but oh my gosh, I'm pretty sure there's some plastic on my shirt, right? In fact, I know there is. It's plastisol. So there's no way to get away from it. I go through this process of how do I minimize, and then how do I make myself more resilient? How do people go about making themselves more resilient, given that you cannot get away from toxins in the world?
Great question. And I think you're also talking about what I talk about when I talk about the 4 A's of environmental health navigation. The 4 A's, and I just arbitrarily picked A, but it seemed to work out well, is really, number one, we assess. We want to know what we're surrounded by, in, on, and around our bodies. We want to assess. We want to educate ourselves as to where these chemicals are coming from, because the second A is avoid, right? We want to cut off the fountain into our body as best we can. And again, I say this as best we can because no one's perfect. I'm sitting here with colored hair. I told you about my boys who play lacrosse on synthetic fields. I could go on and on. The second A being avoid and swapping, because swaps are just as good as avoiding. You're getting rid of a bad thing, but you may find a really safer counterpart. The third thing is add, and that goes to the point where Again, you can take away all the chemicals in the world, anything toxic, light pollution, noise pollution, stress, whatever, but you have to fortify the human body. And this goes again to anthropology and physiology. You have to put in the nutrients that make us thrive at a cellular level. And that goes to basic nutrition, and it goes to clean food. USDA organic is much better choice than conventional because of all the chemicals that go in with your broccoli. It's sort of an oxymoron, right? So, I describe a whole chapter on what I call nutrient insufficiency and becoming nutrient sufficient. Yeah. And it really plays in, again, at the cellular level of how do you make what we've lived with for millions of years prior to this point in time, right? We've only had these chemicals in our lives literally about 100 years. That's 95,000. So how does the body have a chance to evolve and manage these without being pissed? It's a very basic thing, but you can help the body get stronger. You can help the immune system, as I described in the book. You can help our systems work better by managing detoxifying processes that we already have built into us for millions of years. So that's what I want people to harness, not kind of wackadoodle stuff. I'm very much lined up with, basic sweating and exercise and stress management and nutritional levels and understanding the food system and those kind of things.
There are some people who say, I prefer to get all of my nutrients from my food. Is that a good strategy?
I think they're going to be sadly disappointed if they ever looked under the hood, because it turns out that, we're really grossly under nutrified. If you really want to think, it's somewhere like 60% of Americans have low magnesium. I think it's almost 70% have low, or it depends on what you consider low, vitamin D, right? Vitamin D levels, you would see doctors are saying, a level 30 is fine. I would argue against that.
People still listen to those doctors? I thought that was.
I hope so, because I'm one of those doctors.
Under 30 is your recommendation?
Well, no, but one of the doctors that balances science, and there are plenty of good clinicians that are really, exploring and trying to do better from what they did not learn.
That was such a good politically correct answer. Like, wow. What is the appropriate healthy level of vitamin D for most people? Is it 30 or greater?
Oh, it's greater.
I know.
It's greater. Oh, yeah. No, I'm on board with you on that. So the normal lab, Core, Quest, all the conventional labs are 30 to 100, which seems an enormous, big stretch of what we consider normal. But technically what we now know is that having a higher blood level of vitamin D3 really should be upwards of high normal. So 60 to 80, 60 to 90, 70 to 90. Not over, because then you get parathyroid hormone issues with calcium balance, because that's part of the parathyroid gland. But really, D is so critical to the immune system. It's so critical to prevention of autoimmune diseases and immune disorders. It's so critical to heart disease and brain development. So, I think it's a sexy one. We all like to talk about D. And a lot of people are doing a little bit better, but it's not how much you take. I found with patients, it's what the blood levels show. And that varies with gut microbiome absorption, and it varies with comorbidities. It varies with a lot of medications that block it.
Yes.
So because of that, I look at the blood levels as a sign of success, not how much I give someone.
Well said. And you hear that, practitioners listening to the show? I know there's tons of you. And by the way, I'm working on a way to get CE credits for listeners, because it's time that this kind of knowledge gets out there, and it's not there in the old anti-aging paradigms and the old medicine stuff. The 70 to 90 level has been something I've recommended for 20 years, and some doctors freak out. And you're like, well, I'm looking at joints, I'm looking at immunity, and this is really important. And so if you're listening, get a vitamin D test. It's $50. I found out by doing this that I need to take about 15,000 IUs a day for my biology to get my levels up.
Yeah, I'm at 7.
Yeah.
And I eat really pretty well. Again, it's this, and I will tell you, I've gotten into a pickle where I thought I did everything right and I got it wrong with iron. I was iron deficient because I ate such a narrow diet without red meat. I know you'll love that one. And no spinach, but I really had such a narrow
I
diet.
recommend spinach still.
No. I'm okay with spinach as long as it's USDA organic. I
Really?
just like it.
You just like oxalates that suck minerals from your bones? One of those people?
The volume of spinach would be enormous in my world. But, listen, everything is about balance. Everything is about moderation.
Mercury is about moderation and balance?
Oh, please. Come on now. I could go off. Yeah. I told you I need a drink. I told you I need a drink.
I'm just messing with you.
But I know you are. But, the idea is, look, I found out, and I actually created a CME about this, because I teach University of California and some of these doctor programs that, that even, it was very humbling. Even doctors who think they get it right, who feel very, very well educated, and I like to think I am, but, I learned very quickly that my iron had been dropping over 6 years, and I never trended it. There's not even a tab on my lab service to do that. And long story short, my hair started coming out.
Oh, wow.
And wouldn't you know it, there's an association. And so when I hear about, menopause, which I'm sort of jumping into with gusto.
Yeah.
You think about stress. Certainly, I lead a busy life, as a lot of people do. But one of the things I really never associated with hair loss was iron deficiency.
Right.
And then I drink tea all day.
Full of oxalate, just like that spinach.
And guess what happens? The tannins block iron absorption.
Interesting.
So I had a really nice trifecta, and I learned from it, and I fixed it. But I mean, again, when it hits you here, or it hits your tresses, your hair, and you got to do podcasts, you better start figuring it out for your life.
You're a very well educated, and you teach doctors, right? And it took you a while to unpack this. How would a listener's going, I have hair, is it cortisol? Is it estrogen? Is it DHT? Is it iron? Is it copper? How would they know?
Oh, you need an environmental health survey and assessment. One, I actually have it in the book as well. And the idea is, look, it's not just one thing. I did 14 vials of blood to figure out why my hair was falling out. And it was such a fascinating deep dive. And I think, look, does everyone need 14 vials? I think you need a smart practitioner who can narrow it down so you're not bled out. But I think because there are so many reasons why people can have, as one example, hair loss, as opposed to, say, joint swelling or, rash, you need a detective. You need detective work. And that's really what rheumatologists have been doing. But now you layer in environmental health and nutrition training and all that, then you've got a lot more to look at in a much more educated way, I think.
What are the 3 most likely things people are using that would be contributing to the hair loss?
Contributing to hair loss? Oh, well, let's see. I'm not a dermatologist, but, I look at autoimmune diseases. When I think hair loss, I think of, lupus. Lupus is one of the biggest, or rising autoimmune diseases around the world. We're global now, so it's not just isolated to the U.S. We know that, lupus has, as a component of its many physical symptoms, is hair loss. And, of course, I ran a panel on that as well. But I think also, hair loss, as I mentioned, could be stress. There's something called telogen effluvium I learned about, which means, a stressor even 3 months prior to hair loss. That was fascinating. But it's also associated with anesthesia. It's associated with medications. It's associated with, again, iron deficiency. I think people don't. And I'm not talking, interestingly enough, I'm not talking about hemoglobin and hematocrit, a typical CBC, because I even asked my dad about this, who's been practicing medicine 60 years as a nephrologist. And I said, hey, Dad, what would you do if someone had hair loss and had a CBC that was normal and hemoglobin and hematocrit? And he was like, oh, well, all our patients are really tired. And, it was more of he didn't necessarily feel the instinct to do the ferritin and the iron deficiency or the iron panel, and because of his patient population and what his norm was. But I think you have to dig deeper. And that's another component of doctors, I think, that are learning all this information, is that they have an interest to dig deeper, or so to speak, go to the upstream potential. Because I said, why am I anemic? Then you have to go higher. You have to go, where is that coming from? It's
crazy. And there's a sense of overwhelm. I had an episode last year about the iron curse. And too much iron will trash your body. Not enough iron will trash your body. And there's all these complex interactions between iron and copper. And did you take vitamin C with your beef or did you not take it? Because that helps with iron absorption. And I know listeners are going, this is just too much. Like, I don't even know if I have too much iron because I don't know which lab test to get and I can't afford the lab test anyway.
Right. Interesting.
How do we get out of this?
Well, you buy my book and you read about nutrition. I'm not going to lie. I even have codes in there for routine screening for cancers that every primary should be able to just order through conventional labs and using their health insurance. I even have tests for metals and like literally drawing it into the Western medical world.
Yes.
Please hand these codes to your doctor. These are the ICD-10 codes. They will be covered with this coding, and if they're willing to, they may not be experts. I wouldn't expect them to. I don't hold that against them, but I would expect maybe an interest in moving further if the labs are abnormal. So, I want people to have the tools and the resources to be able to figure out more about their bodies.
I love your answer. It's so direct, like buy my book, but it's a real answer. Your book is called Detoxify, and here's the thing: you and I, even though we have access to lab tests beyond almost anyone on the planet, to be honest. Like, you're a doctor. You don't even have to go around doctors to order lab tests the way I do. I just work with a ton of them. But the idea here is you can get anything you want, but we still have to process all the data and all that stuff. So you know from clinical experience, I know from all the things I've done, there are best practices. Like, if you wanted to just cut out massive problems, reduce your exposure to the worst toxins. And that's going to make everything better without even having to know what's going on in there. And then if you have a specific problem, you start ordering labs, and you do have the toxin labs that you'd want to look at to see what's going on in there. And that lets you allocate your dollars for lab testing effectively.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to give people the playbook. I'm trying to think about, their finances. I'm you. I didn't know where I was going with this 15 years ago. And then I figured out the playbook. And I'm just trying to help people get answers. Now, I will say this, labs are one thing. Interpreting the labs are a bigger issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, it's kind of like, who's your messenger, right? Who do you learn from? I trained with Andrew Weil. I love what he does, right?
He's on the show. He's a great guy.
These are people that I really have, bought the Kool-Aid. I mean, drank the Kool-Aid. I mean, I just love his work and a lot of other mentors. The idea is that who is going to interpret those lab tests is critically important to whether you panic. And listen, I will say this is just the same for Western medicine. If I tell you how many people come to see me with a positive ANA.
What's an ANA?
So an ANA is a screening test for a lot of autoimmune diseases. It covers quite a few of them, not just in the rheumatology world, GI ones such as Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, Hashimoto's for thyroid, autoimmune disease, even autoimmune liver disease. The idea is that how you interpret an ANA can be the difference between someone freaking out, panicking, and crying for 3 months until they see a rheumatologist, which, by the way, is the average wait time to see a conventional rheumatologist, because they're getting fewer and far between. Separate issue, but something very concerning, at least to me. Or saying, hey, listen, 1 to 40 titer, 1 to 80 titer, 1 to even 160 titer, which are the levels, it goes higher and higher, with no clinical issues on a good exam and a good history, you're fine, lady. You're fine, sir. Those are really important distinctions. And so interpretation of labs, be it chemicals or be it Western levels of Western testing, I think is really kind of important. So you got to be thoughtful about who you choose.
I recently ran a panel for environmental toxins, and there's a whole bunch of them out there. And I take in my coffee, plug for Danger Coffee, I take some things that binds to environmental toxins. I did grow a lot of my own food, but I'm very selective about what I eat. And I don't eat fake stuff. And I do all the things most people wouldn't even think about when I travel to reduce my exposure. And I did really well. I had mildly elevated levels of glyphosate, just touching the edge of yellow, and mildly elevated for atrazine, which pisses me off. That was also just touching the edge of the yellow zone, and everything else was essentially zero, which is really hard to do. Right.
Or maintain, let alone get one hit. Right.
But what the hell? Like, I'm still getting glyphosate and atrazine, and I don't think that there's anyone on the planet, unless they only live on their farm and never travel. I'm on airplanes half the time, so that's even harder. What would I do if I wanted to have less glyphosate in my body and I don't eat anything with glyphosate and I don't drink tap water?
So it just occurred to me, I think I left out the fourth A, which is pertinent to this point. So again, the 4 A's were assess, avoid, add for nutrition. But the fourth was allow.
Allow. I refuse to allow.
Yeah. I mean, listen, you can go nuts. This is why I'm saying, like, I've been on the ledge. I did this for 15 years, and I was certainly on the ledge very early on when I was so shocked by all this. And I've come down a few notches because life is life, and we travel, and we have kids on lacrosse fields, and we color our hair. And, there's a lot of, look, I'm traveling to come see you, right? Mm-hmm. And travel is really a hard process because you have so limited access to what you're normally surrounded by in your home. But you have to make exceptions. That's the allow. And so the idea is when I get home, I'm going to sauna. I'm going to run more. I mean, I just exercised this morning to get a little bit of my travel chemicals out. But the idea is in terms of glyphosate or any number of 95,000. We could talk about BPA and canned foods that you could cut out. There's a variety. Water is a big issue, as I say, when you travel. You could try to go nuts and really work hard to make yourself so, perfection is never going to be where it's at, in my opinion. It's just not a reasonable goal, and it takes away valuable energy resources from other things we can do, low-hanging fruit.
That point in your book about allow might be the most important point. And the reason is that I've seen people lose their mind over perfection. And for instance, on a sleep score, I've been tracking my sleep for, I think, 18 years now, right? Yeah. And if every morning, my sleep score wasn't as good as I wanted, I'm going to feel like crap today, I would go crazy. And it can actually fire your amygdala, and then more stress actually increases autoimmunity. So bottom line is, no one on earth is going to be free of toxins because the earth is full of them. And we can fix that. It's going to take us probably like 50 years if we put all of our resources, which we won't because of, all sorts of reasons. So from that perspective, do you have enough resilience for the level of toxins that you're exposed to? And if you do, you can do this weird thing called choose danger, which, yes, that is the coffee company name. And it's, I choose danger because who knows what I might do. Like, I know that if I go skiing, that I have enough muscle that I can probably handle this, even though I might hit a tree and die, right? And I know that, okay, I'm going to drink, the water from a can with BPA in the lining because it's the only water there is, and I'll be just fine because I can manage it. Yeah. And it's that kind of resilience we have to build into all of us. And step one, from what I believe, is detoxify. Get the toxins out because they stop all of your resilience from happening. So you reduce those as best you can, and your book is kind of the guidebook on how to do it. Right. And it's kind of funny. You come at this and you're like, well, I work on joints. And you end up at the same point. Well, get rid of the damn toxins because it's not just your joints. It's your brain. It's your hair. It's your skin. It's everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and so, we were talking earlier about having kids, and I have 2 teenagers and you have kids. And, one of the biggest, I think, gifts that I can give to them as a parent is perspective. Mm-hmm. And I really try to extend that to my patients who have no perspective of medical stuff. Why would they? I have no perspective on IT and my computers. If someone comes in and says they're all trash, I'd be like, okay. The idea is perspective is just so critical to motivation, resilience. And when I was thinking, when you were saying the word resilience, did you mean at this physiologic level? Did you mean at the mental health level, at the, the gumption level? I wasn't quite sure, but I know what you're saying. And the idea is that, you have to balance perspective of the big picture problem with really vetted changes that would be high yield so that, again, you're handling the stuff that has the largest load into your body. I think of water as my number one, topic that I like to bring to people's attention because I think we spend an awful lot of money and time publishing books and doing stories and conferences about food. Mm-hmm. Which, of course, is valuable. But people don't also see things like water. And when I think of high-yield perspective-type topics, I think of high-load, I think water, food, certainly. Mm-hmm. And then we can get into others like food packaging and other things that we may or may not control.
When I talk about resilience, my model in biohacking is that resilience starts inside each cell with cell membrane integrity and function, and then it resonates up through all of your biological systems, and then it gets to emotional, and then it gets even into spiritual resilience. And they're different aspects, but all of them are easier if your biology works right, which means let's get rid of the toxins because then the cells can do their job. And then you're saying, look, I feel so good. I think I'll be resilient. But if you're cratered like I was in my 20s and your mitochondrial function isn't there and your levels of toxins are off the charts, I had heavy metals, I had toxic mold, and a bunch of other stuff going on. And so you just don't have any energy. So you're not resilient emotionally or physically. With us antibiotics for 15 years, then broken microbiome, and you get like stuck in all this stuff. And fortunately, I was able to climb out of it. But knowing what that feels like and knowing what it's like to carry an extra 100 pounds of weight, I don't wish that on anyone. And so that resilience, like, I've got this. And if it's a health problem, I've got this. And then the definition of biohacking, change the environment around you and inside of you so you have control of your biology. 70% of the environment inside you is water. And a huge amount outside of you is water.
I would say 85. Yeah, no, you're right. You're getting right to the point. If we don't get this right, we're made up of water. If we don't get this right, what is the point? I mean, I go to gyms where they have, or even my hotel, body wash, shampoo, conditioner. I'm thinking, I just worked out and I'm going to put this stuff back on my body at the gym or back in my hotel room. So I bring my own stuff. You know, the idea is that if you are just allowed to see better, you don't have to do necessarily better. You can do it in your own pace. It's a journey for everybody because it was still a journey for me. Like, I'm still working through things that go into my life that I just didn't even think of. But it's kind of like getting new glasses on, right? It's like you're seeing the world in a very different way. It shouldn't panic you. It should be something that you incorporated so it sticks. It's not a diet. It's about lifestyle changes. And so, you know, you live and learn as you go. You get one accomplishment, you do well, you feel better about it, and then you layer in another. And really, it's a timetable for every individual because everyone has different lifestyle obligations and time restraints and financial restraints. But your point is very well made. If you don't take away the funnel of chemicals into your body, it doesn't give the rest of your cellular processes a chance to function. And then again, if you don't have the nutrition, chicken or the egg, you can't get rid of some of the stuff that's either getting in there or already in there. So it's just a very two-pronged approach. Take away the bad stuff, add in the fertilizer, the human fertilizer, and we can go into that, but I think we agree on a lot of the same fertilizer.
What do you do for drinking water when you travel to reduce toxins?
I wish I got this down better. I think as I move, so let me just say this. I bring my stainless steel container to the airport.
But is it nickel-free?
I think it is. It's actually lead-free, actually, from what I know from people who test them. But yes, listen, you can't go too crazy. But it doesn't have a plastic flippy straw.
Oh, that's cool.
You know, the components that are on stainless steel make it sort of obsolete in some ways. But, you know, then you have to dump the liquids before you go through security. Which is dumb, but...
Wait, you're a doctor. Can't you say it's medical liquid?
Not quite.
Have you tried?
Have not tried.
I've seen some people get through without
medical liquid. Boy, that's a pisser. I don't really know if I'd ever tried that. But it's just, you know, look, it's the water I created home with my reverse osmosis and, you know, very affordable for your audience who's listening. You don't need a whole house filter. You can do one right underneath your kitchen sink. I shout on mountaintops about this.
That's what I do.
And by the way, I don't know if you fun fact about nephrology and my dad, I'll throw this in. Reverse osmosis was the technology for dialysis patients in the 70s when it was first invented. And it was because the pore size of this material was so small, it caught single-celled organisms like bacteria and mold and yeast and viruses. And it was so incredible back then, but these huge tanks, which now still exist in dialysis units, because I visit them, they are now offered to everyone else for all of the vast number of compounds that were bigger that got caught in the same net.
Yes.
And so I think when people understand that little bit of history, it's so compelling that we are now all able to afford a reverse osmosis. My system was $275. I won at the office, what have you. But I forgot the original question. But anyway, I mean, that I just
What do you do with water when you travel?
Oh, okay.
So you like reverse osmosis. So do I.
I travel with, I bring it to the airport. I drink it all down. And then unfortunately, I was really getting into this mode of looking at bottled water, which I don't want to have to do bottled water ever, but it is really kind of what we're left with in the sense that there's not a lot of glass-made products. But you can, on a bottled water, by the way, look at the ingredients. And the ingredients will tell you how that water's cleaned. So it will say reverse osmosis or purified by distillation or municipal tap. Can you believe that? I've seen those before. But then there's also fill-up stations that are in airports that use carbon block technology, and I've looked them up as well.
And I feel like those are a better choice now because you have all the plastic bottles, which are full of all sorts of things you don't want. And if you can find a fill-up station, even though it's not reverse osmosis the way it should be by law, they at least carbon block will pull a lot of things out.
Great point. And actually, I just switched over. It saves you money because you don't have to keep buying bottled water. But a single liter of a plastic bottle contains upwards of 240,000 microplastics.
Yeah.
And another study showed that up to 90% are nanoplastics. So we're talking about systems that are not yet ready for prime time. Most filters, even reverse osmosis, have some issues with this. But I have converted myself to doing what you're talking about too, is just really filling up at filling stations and looking to see that helps, at least not the microplastic component of it. Well, at least you reduce it. But I'm saying you don't have the aggressiveness of reverse osmosis.
What about when you're in hotels? What do you do?
So I really try to find a local store that might have glass bottled water.
Do you want to hack for that?
Yeah.
Okay. I just made a decision about 3 years ago. Like, I'm spending half my life in hotels, which is not a longevity strategy. I'm doing it because I think it's helping people. There's all the crap they put in the air and fabric softeners.
Cleaning products. When I walk in, I'm like hit by all these chemicals, and I'm just like, ugh.
And
yeah.
I'm actually working with a few different hotel companies. We're having conversations about co-designing rooms that are actually not just healthy, but beyond healthy, that upgrade you. So, fingers crossed on that one. But what I do is you can do this yourself, but because, I'm very lazy and very busy, I ask my assistant to do it. You go to Instacart and you have a case of glass bottled water delivered to your room. Now, it usually is going to cost like $25 for a case of San Pellegrino, okay, in glass bottles. If you were to buy one bottle of San Pellegrino from the hotel, they're going to charge you like $18 for it. Right. And I go through 4 or 5 bottles a day because I'll brew my Danger coffee in the morning using San Pellegrino because I don't want to use tap water, right? So 5 bottles a day would be as much as I pay for some of my rooms just for the freaking water. And I would go to a hotel that would deliver glass bottles cost effectively. And I think we're going to see a shift over the next 3 years where more and more people don't want plastic, so hotels will respond. And we could actually go back to the way it was when I was a little kid, where the Coca-Cola bottling plant would just recycle bottles. It's not like we couldn't do it because we already did it. Since that hasn't happened yet, I just say I'm the annoying guest at the hotel, and I always tip the guys, $5-10 because they brought the case of water up to your room, and then I'm done, and I don't think about it anymore.
That's a great hack. I used to tell people when I post, because I have a platform called The Smart Human, which, I do all my education on that. But
does Monsanto run The Dumb Human? I'm just wondering.
Well, it came out of the insult, I thought, from the Dummies Guides. And Idiots Guides. I really didn't love that. So I was just epiphany. I'm going to name everything The Smart Human. People think I'm talking about myself, but I'm not. I'm talking about the audience.
Yeah. It's actually very respectful. I always hated that, the Complete Idiot's Guide too. I'm like, why would I read that? Because I don't think I'm an idiot. There's some things I don't know. But
yeah, I don't know. I felt like it was self-deprecating and reminded me of childhood trauma or something. But here's the thing. I used to tell when we used to go for families, family vacations, they always spray and clean so much the room that you walk in. And I said, you know what, I'm going to just try calling to the hotel and just say, asking the cleaning service not to use any chemicals because I have kids that are allergic. And for some reason, that actually appealed to people as opposed to, I'm the crazy mom who's into environmental health research. Could you not do the chemicals? And then they throw in a couple extra just to annoy me. But
that's smart.
It's just something about children, appealing to children, to people about children's sensitivities that I think is worth exploring, because it certainly motivates, when you call ahead and you do those things, I think it could be helpful. So it's just a little hack, but it's similar to yours. Thinking ahead as part of your daily where you move through life, which rooms, work. I have cleaning products that I buy for my cleaning service at my office, for my medical office. Those are choices I've made. I had flooring put in that wasn't carpeting, it was ceramic. Those are choices I've made. I think that, again, you layer them in, you bring them into your life. If they work, great. If they don't, you move on. But you constantly are kind of surveying what you put in, on, and around your body in a reasonable way.
Do you trust the EPA about drinking water standards?
Do I trust the EPA? The EPA, I think, has its challenges and has been not successful in its goal, I believe, of keeping our modern day population healthy.
Oh my gosh, are you going to run for office someday? That was such a non-answer.
Well, listen, I walk a fine line between the science and the reality. And sometimes the reality is the science, of course. But, here's the thing. Let me give you an example. We have in our water system, 160,000 wastewater treatment plants across the U.S. that serve about 85% of the U.S. population for drinking water, The other 15% is well water people, right? Suburbs, farms, school districts, that type of thing. And believe it or not, these 160,000 wastewater treatment plants that serve so many humans actually only followed the law of the Safe Drinking Water Act from 1974.
Because we knew so much back then.
We knew so much. We always think we know so much, right? Who are we kidding? Every generation thinks. But, the idea was that was certainly before the heavy hitter chemicals and all of the flux of chemicals started coming out. So we didn't know what we didn't know. The problem is, unfortunately, is that law hasn't changed in 50 years.
Wow.
We have 91 chemicals under that law, only 91 chemicals. And we can look it up. Everyone in your audience can look them up. Only 91 chemicals are looked at for levels, remediated, and have to be fixed. The problem is we have 95,000 that potentially get into our water systems, plus the detergents, the fluoride, the chlorinated chemicals, the PVC piping or the lead that gets to your home. So we only have one opportunity to clean that water on a routine basis, and that's when it hits your home, the point of use. And so again, EPA, it can restrict. I think now we have 6 PFAS chemicals that are potentially going to be removed and added to that 91 chemicals list, but it may not move forward. And that's just way too small compared to the 15,000 PFAS chemicals that actually could get into your water, as an example.
Is there any city in the U.S. where you would drink tap water?
Willingly, no. Because it's a federal law, and that covers so when people tell me, and I write about this in the book, I used to live in New York. I trained in New York. Oh, the bagels are great. It's all about the water. I think to myself, well, I'm not sure if I would agree with that being the only value of the New York City water. I like their bagels, though, but I will say that everything in this, every wastewater treatment plant for every state in this country actually follows that law. So it's again a non-issue when it comes to choice.
It feels like restaurants are a major source of toxin exposure. How many restaurants use properly filtered water to wash or prepare food? I opened the first all grass-fed, no bad oils restaurant in LA about 10 years ago. And I insisted on filtered water for everything we did with high-end expensive filters. And people who bought the food never knew. It increased my cost a lot. I don't know that I could, charge more for it, but I just wanted people to feel good when they ate it. So if you go to a restaurant, you're getting bad water in your food and it was on your food. What other chemicals are people getting from restaurant food they wouldn't get in their home?
Well, again, you made me sad because I want to go out to some nice restaurants here. And so, again, this is balance between, quality of life and fear. And yeah, I think it's a great thing that you did that because it meant something to you to infuse that change into the work you do and with the restaurant. There's exposures everywhere. I mean, how do we not know that the chef behind, in the kitchen is using a nonstick pan? to
They're not
souffle.
supposed to, but
Right, but we've got these components. First of all, I think that we should be fixing our homes first. We should hold ourselves accountable first, because we can do so much. Again, that's what the whole book is about. That's what I teach, my students and online. We have so much more power than we think we do to reduce these exposures. We really do. And so, for instance, those pans would be an issue. Look, dishwashing detergent. That's a whole uphill climb for me, and I tried to figure it out, right? And it wasn't so complicated after I had the right resources, which everyone needs correct vetted resources. But there's so much you can't control when you go out of your home, which is why 80-20 rule. Try to make your home one of the cleanest places. My workplace happens to be very clean because I'm very conscientious. It took time to do that. But I think we need to do our business in our home, try to make that the example, and then we can start to, move into other areas of our lives.
I like to not eat takeout because of the plastic trays. I know what's in those microplastics and endocrine disruptors, and I'd rather just eat there. And do your best to just eat real food, but you don't really know what you're getting in any restaurant. So when I'm at home, I usually cook at home because I can get the good stuff. If you could ban 3 common household items or cleaners or other things people do, what would your top 3 most toxic things to remove be?
Cleaning products, number 1.
Okay.
Because not only are we marketed to in such a crazy way, keeping up with the Joneses, you need a door cleaner, you need a carpet cleaner, you need a surface cleaner, you need a window cleaner, you need a drain cleaner. I mean, even just hearing that list makes me feel silly.
I just use like water and a little bit of soap. Am I crazy?
Yeah, no, you're not crazy. Water, soap, white vinegar, real lemon juice, real lemon essential oil, but make sure it's really not with phthalates. Sea salt for scrubbing. I mean, going back generations to people who are grandparents who never had these chemicals, they also, in many ways, live longer because they didn't have a starting point with those chemicals like so many of us do. And those chemicals, whether it's cleaning products, whether it's personal care products, which we can now vet pretty reasonably with lots of different apps and websites, they end up in our homes in dust. Dust is one of the biggest harbingers of chemicals. The great studies on this, actually. So again, stopping the flow into your home is similar to stopping it in your body.
Okay, but you can't just be like, I want to ban cleaning products and personal care products because I think that wouldn't work. So can you be more specific? Cleaning products, what is the most evil cleaning product people work with?
Oh,
you don't have to name brands.
I think we need to be careful of bleach, even though we like to have bleached up toilets and all that. We have to be careful of bleach because it can turn into cyclophenate and components that affect the thyroid. So we now know that, and again, that's an example of chemicals coming into your body through products we love, but then also not having enough iodine in our thyroid nutritionally to offset some of the health effects that come from very everyday products.
So we would replace bleach, say, with peroxide.
Peroxide is probably reasonable in limited amounts. I don't see how that would be a problem. I don't typically have that around. I remember that from med school and, blood stains. But the idea is that, white vinegar is remarkable in terms of its cleaning ability. Isopropyl alcohol, talking about infection, COVID. I ran around with a spray bottle of isopropyl alcohol, 70% alcohol. With the other component, when you look at the bottom, other ingredients, water. Yeah. Correct. And I really employ everybody to look at cleaning products, look at cosmetics, and look for what's called other ingredients hidden down at the bottom on the side, because really that can hold up to 98% of the contents of that process, 99 actually.
It's funny. All these people buying dumb sanitizer, I'm like, just get spray 70% alcohol. It does the same thing. It goes away quickly. It doesn't make your hands smell like something gross. And perhaps the funniest thing I've ever seen about this, yes, I go to Burning Man. I'm guessing you don't.
Why would you guess that?
I don't know. You just don't have
Maybe I have another side of me.
You could. I think you might have a closet burner here. Somebody at Burning Man put up a hand sanitizer station with a sign on top that said clearly lube. And all the people who just reflexively smear chemicals on their hands all the time would do it and then rub their hands and they're in the dust going, oh my God, what did I just do? So that's my sense of humor. But
I like that.
what we can all do if you're concerned about things, 70% isopropyl, no fragrance. When you talk about bleach, I think bleach is incredibly useful, and everyone should have a bottle of unscented bleach on hand in case you run out of clean water, because in an emergency, you use a few drops of it to make water so it doesn't have parasites, it's safe to drink. It's like a prepper thing. Try to go online and order Clorox without fragrance in the bleach. It's very hard to find plain old boring bleach, and they're adding these endocrine disrupting things. And it kind of makes me sad because bleach should smell like bleach, not flowers. And I don't know why we're doing this. It kind of drives me nuts because I got to be friends with the past president and CEO of Clorox. And you're like, what? Like, that's like that's not a good company. The guy was actually very environmentally minded and was working for the good guys, I would say. His name was Benno. I think he might be on the board or chairman now. And we had this great conversation, and he's like, look, we've reduced the amount of plastic and trash bags by 30%. Like, we're working on making things better, right? And we have, we've had this whole big thing of chemicals and all that. And since that time, I've noticed it seems like there's more fragrances since he was on the head of things. So sometimes getting our leadership more conscious about this is important. And then you have other brands like Ecos. I've been out to the Ecos factories. I've talked to their lead research and development team and gone into the labs and looked at what they're doing to have no microplastics, at least in some of their things, to reduce packaging waste and to not have artificial things in. I'm like, this is pretty legit, right? So there are some brands that are better than others. Mm-hmm. All brands will greenwash. You can't trust any of them until you really go deep on it, or you find people you trust who will do the going deep for you. Are there any brands, like major brands, that are more likely to be clean than others that you found?
Well, that I do a lot of academic work, so I never talk about brands or endorse products or companies.
No, that's for an endorsement. Just if you went to Whole Foods or
no, I have to say it. It's Jewish Guild. I have to say that
you're not getting paid by anyone.
Yeah, exactly, and that makes my work and what I do legitimate, in my opinion. But look, there are problems within even individual brands. Burt's Bees, for example, maybe 10 years ago. Very reasonable brand, but.
Owned by Clorox.
But they had a couple lip balms that had coloring in them that gave them a ding and made there was some mercury found like 10 years ago. The idea is that every company, even within the brand, can have a potential problem. For instance, Axe body spray, when I teach high school students, I bring in bags of stuff from the local big box store. And look, you'd be surprised. Even like the brown nail polish is actually a 1 on EWG's Skin Deep database, but the clear is probably a 10. It's very interesting to let these kids work through these products on their own, look them up, and look at alternatives. And even Axe body spray, depending on which scent, had a different rating because of the phthalates, which we know extend the length of the scent longer and make it have a longer shelf life, but are associated with a whole host of immune disrupting chemical issues and endocrine disrupting. But looking for things without fragrance would be a very good start to anything. Because we know with the word fragrance, we know there can be upwards of 300 whatever number of chemicals, typically phthalates, that are in the word perfume or fragrance on anything, whether it's laundry detergent, whether it's cosmetics. So the idea is if you take that away, you're taking the risk of lots of untested or even tested that are problematic chemicals outside, out of your body, from being put in. So, I think the less is more, keep it simple, stupid, less is more approach. I talk like this all the time because I feel like we are so oversold with antimicrobials and the triclosan families and macroban and we're so oversold on the cleanliness issue. Again, brilliant marketing, that we have to step back and get a little dirtier and have a little bit more exposures so that our immune system gets a little hardier. I'm not saying to salmonella and E. coli and any number of, measles, what have you, but I'm talking about in general for people who otherwise not immunocompromised. We should really be thinking about the less products, the less chemicals, because we know too little and too much about them at this point.
When I asked you that question, I started thinking, what would I ban? I would ban all air fresheners. because they have no health benefits whatsoever. They usually hide something like a musty, moldy smell or something you didn't want anyway.
Or a sink full of dishes. Like, I don't even understand the marketing on that, actually.
Yeah.
They're like, no, you could dance around a sink full of dirty dishes, but we're going to spray the air. Why don't you just clean the dirty dishes?
And it's like the plugins, like, oh, look, I'm just suppressing my testosterone all the time. Thank you. And then you have the things that the Uber drivers. And if you drive an Uber and you're listening to the show and you have a green little pine tree hanging up, your balls are shrinking if you have balls. Like it's that big of a deal. And if you ride in an Uber, I very politely, I have a great rider rating. I'm like, hey, man, those things give me a migraine. Could you just put it in the glove box? Like, I don't want to breathe that. And like, oh, yeah, no problem. Right. And if you act all entitled and rude, they'll probably, it won't end well. But so I would just get rid of those because they are only a tax on society. Second thing, any personal care product that has perfume or fragrance in it. Because not only are you screwing up your own testosterone and immune system, as your book talks about, you're doing it to other people, right? So you don't have a right to make me smell your pretty perfume or your Axe body spray any more than I do to you walk around covered in skunk oil or something that you wouldn't like. It's actually rude to make yourself smell.
In California, there used to be, I don't know if you remember all the magazines that you would almost like open up and they would stink, right? With perfumes that were getting sold.
Yeah.
You didn't even have to open them up, actually. They would just stink from the newsstand. And I believe in California, they was the first, surprise, surprise, which we love California for doing that stuff. They banned fragrance in magazines in the state I think it's under the Civil Disabilities Act.
I didn't know that. Thank you.
Because really, and I say this even when I post it on Christmas and holiday gift giving, you're giving the gift of harm if you're not thinking a little bit more deeply into the candles and into all the smelly things, the pumpkin spice. And, listen, I get it. They smell fine. I used to have a drawer. I talk about it in my book. I used to have an entire drawer after I got married. I had a new house. I was about to start a family. And it was like playing, house. You wanted your home to smell nice. It was part of that badge of starting a family for me. And the entire drawer was like ocean breeze and strawberry fields. And I remember the day when I was learning this material, I remember the day I took the whole drawer and dumped it. And I did that with cosmetics and all the samples I got in the perfume section of Macy's, right? Mm-hmm. You learn and grow. And as you learn and grow, you change. And I think being flexible is key. And your whole life has been flexible, right?
Yeah.
I've been trying to be more flexible too. I think when sometimes you get older, you get a little bit more inflexible. But I guess I'm inflexible for the things that I think will harm me. But I think you have to be open-minded to how to change. And change will have really great results if you do it in the right way.
There's a medical concept you know very well, triage. So you have a bunch of people from a car accident come into a hospital. Well, which are the ones that need attention now? Where if I change something, I can do it in the amount of time that I have, and it'll meaningfully improve outcomes. And then like, oh, there's a guy who stubbed his toe. Right? I don't have to deal with that guy now. He can wait, and maybe I'll never get to him, and he'll limp home. And it's okay. Right? So when I'm looking at removing toxins from my environment, I kind of do the triage things. What are the things that make me feel awful right now? What are the things that suppress mitochondrial function and testosterone and thyroid function that are at high levels that are easy to fix? Well, let's put those at the top of the list. And if you just look at it like that, I'm never going to get to the middle or bottom list. It doesn't matter. I just got 80% of the problem solved by doing 20% of the work. And I think your book, Detoxify, you do a great job explaining why you should pay attention. Like if you're listening to this and you have fabric softener in your house, you can pause the episode or just keep listening and then walk over, pick it up and throw it in the trash and take it off your grocery list. You do not need that ever, and it only harms you, right? And there's one more thing that we haven't talked about that would be number 3 on my list of things that, what would I ban? Synthetic fleece. Talk about that.
It's a shame because I have a couple fleece things at Rome. And listen, it's hard to avoid. Yeah. It is so damn soft. I mean, I have to say, listen, it is so damn soft. And it gets softer and softer. I mean, I feel like I'm wearing a puppy, Mm-hmm. But here's the thing, those are microplastics. They do get into the washing machine water. They do drain, just like Drano and all these horrible chemicals. I think I just undrained a clog at my home before I left. Where does all this stuff go? This stuff goes out. Mm-hmm. It goes all the way through our water system. It goes into our lakes and our oceans, our aquifers. And it cycles back into us. And again, you could say, I'm going to have fleece, but I'm going to get an RO filter. That's one way to solve the problem, but it's not really helping the universe. It's not helping the ecosystem at large. So I have cut back on fleece. I don't buy new fleece, but every time you wash, you are contributing to the microplastic problem. Right. I don't think everyone's thinking about this. But again, you do things if it makes your heart feel better. You did that with the reverse osmosis water in your restaurant. I think that that's the kind of way we have to sort of lead in some ways by example as well. I share this with my kids and students. And again, we want a planet. Our planet, I'm about to speak at their school for climate change for Earth Day. And I'm bringing in the concept that what you do to our planet will cycle back into our bodies. We're seeing that with air quality and air pollutants. We're seeing that with water and water pollutants. We're seeing that with EMF radiation. My kids and all their friends, I walk into the school and they all have laptops on their groin, on their crotch. Or their phones, the girls wear them in their bra. The idea is not to say don't have a phone and don't have a computer. It's just use them wisely.
Put them on airplane mode if they're near your boobs or your balls or your ovaries. You really don't want a phone there.
Yeah. So that's kind of the point, is that there's lots of things that will affect us that cycle back. It's very cyclical. And, even light pollution, noise pollution, it all creates noise and stress. So we have to really be thinking, how do we take back anthropology? How do we take back our evolution a little bit and go back to when it was sort of less toxic, but smarter?
It's something that's possible. And there's things that people probably wouldn't think about. We talked about water. There's also air, and those fleece. If you dry a fleece in your dryer, it fills your home with microplastics that you breathe that bypass a lot of these things and get into your lungs. So you wouldn't know this when you walked in unless you're paying attention. The carpet that we're on is wool. And wool carpets can be expensive, or if you look around online, they're actually not substantially more expensive than a medium quality synthetic rug. And my audio guys, thanks AJ, they're filtering out the low hum in the background that is an air filter, which means we're not breathing any dust, even from the wool rug. And I'm like, okay, I set myself up. So I got increased resilience from those things. And they weren't that hard to do. And once I did them, they just always work, right? And that means that I can take more hits when I get on an airplane. And in this idea that, okay,
it's a balance. It's a balance. What you do at your home is 80%, 90%. Then you go out into the real world and you have to, deal with what life throws at you.
Right.
And I agree. Look, I live the same way. I get my hair colored, but I've been doing this for decades. It's something I want to continue for the moment. I may change, but I'm also filtering my water and I'm eating organic and I chose out my personal care products carefully. I wear a lot of stuff that you could see, but they're all vetted. Everything's vetted for at least the lowest toxicity that I can find. If I get a massage, I take baby massage oil that's EWG1 to the massage place so that I can have them use my stuff. I take my nail base coat to a nail salon if I'm going to get my nails done, which is not that often, but when I do, I want the coating closest to my skin to be the least toxic. So there's little hacks throughout your life that once you get into them, they're not more expensive. They're just more thoughtful.
A big part of what I teach is perfection is unachievable anyway.
Right.
So if you're going to use 1 unit of suffering or of effort or of work or of dollars, it should give you the best results, right? Because you're going to do it anyway. So if you were going to brush your teeth at night, do you use toothpaste that introduces a potent thyroid disruptor called fluoride? Or do you use a toothpaste that reverses cavities better than fluoride without fluoride? It was the same amount of time brushing your teeth. You might spend $1 more on the toothpaste. I don't know. It depends on which brand. But okay, it was no net additional anything other than one better choice. And your book is full of better choices. The book is called Detoxify, and it's by Aly Cohen. And thank you for coming to Austin and being on the show and spreading an important message for pregnant women, especially for teenagers. Like, if you're a teenager now, you are fucked if you do not control your toxins. I just have to tell you this.
You should call my kids.
You won't have the hormones that make you powerful and make you go out into the world and change things and build a tribe. Literally, the fragrances you're using make you want to play video games and sleep in and just kind of be a zombie, and you wonder why you're anxious. Like, cut out the body spray. I'm not even kidding. And so you've got all the stuff in there. It's scientific. It makes sense. You're a real doctor. Me, I'm an unlicensed biohacker. So you can't take away my license for speaking the truth. But thank you for doing the hard work of both treating patients and then teaching doctors, which is really important, and then teaching us on the show and just writing the book. It's a lot of work.
Thank you, Dave. It was a pleasure to be here. I really look forward to it. And now that I've met you and had this conversation, I'm thrilled. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And give me a URL for your book.
Oh, well, The Smart Human.
Okay.
Everything I do is thesmarthuman.com or The Smart Human on any of the social media feeds. So,
cool. And just to know, guys, I'm the dumb human, in case you're wondering. I'll see you on the next episode.
See you next time on the Human Upgrade Podcast.